Welcome, everyone. This is Debbie Mayberry with National Kitchen and Bath Association. If you're just joining us, you're here for our second webinar of the month on smart home technology. Today's session is called Wellness, What's Biophilia? With Ed Wenk and Walt Zerbe of CEDIA and Julie Jacobson, who is with CE Pro from Emerald Expositions. And Ed, I'm going to unmute your line and we're ready to get started. Thank you so much.
Brilliant. Thank you. I appreciate it. Welcome, everyone. What is biophilia? It's wellness. It's more. Biophilia is part of wellness. Wellness is part of biophilia. We will learn how these terms operate and how they're interchangeable yet not. We'll explain all this. Trust me. My name's Ed Wenk. I'm the content director with CEDIA. And our panelists today, we've got a couple of them here. We've got there we go. Sorry, my computer apparently had glue in the keys. Walt Zerbe is the Senior Director of Technology and Standards with CEDIA. CEDIA is the leading global authority in the $19 billion home technology industry, and we represent 3,900 member companies worldwide. Julie Jacobson is the founding editor of CE Pro. CE Pro magazine is the leading trade publication for professionals involved in the custom electronics business. Walt, welcome. Good to talk to you again. Walt and I also host a podcast that drops weekly at cedia.net, Spotify, iTunes, or wherever else you get your podcasts, if you're really interested in all this stuff. Hi, Walt. How are you today, sir?
Hey, Ed. I'm great. Thanks. How are you?
Terrific. And Julie, how are you? Julie, are you there? We may have lost Julie. Well, we'll get back to Julie in just a minute. Before we begin, I would like to encourage all of you to send us any questions you might have. They will appear in the box at the right of your screen. We will try to answer any that we can if there's time at the end. And if not, we'll take your questions offline and make the attempt there. Julie, are you with us yet? Nope, she's still muted. We'll talk to her in a few minutes. So today's webinar is going to tackle what's called biophilia and biophilic design and how technology related to those concepts impacts the modern home. We are going to explore how technology meets building design in this area to create spaces that help human beings live better lives at every stage of life and in every circumstance, including those with special needs. I would like to start with an anecdote that is not really about biophilia or wellness. It's a great example, though, of how our CEDIA folks began hacking the available tech around them for human betterment. Our folks have been addressing these issues for a very long time. One of our integrators, a gent who's also a longtime CEDIA volunteer and instructor, is a fellow named Ken Erdman. He has a firm in Utah. You can see him there pictured top left. As his dad started getting on in years, Ken wanted to make sure he was keeping tabs on his pop. His dad is an independent-minded kind of guy, and he wanted to stay in his own home as he aged. He certainly didn't want Ken installing any cameras to check up on the senior Erdman. So Ken installed several sensors in his father's home. One set was tucked under the carpet next to his dad's bed, so the sensors would pick up when the elder Erdman had gotten up out of bed. Another one was triggered by the door of the medicine cabinet, so that Ken at least knew when that door was being opened and closed. It was a good indicator that his dad was taking his meds at the proper time. These little hacks were installed in his dad's home a few years ago, long before the current explosion of connected devices. Ken would receive a simple text message that alerted Ken to the activity in his father's home. By thinking carefully about his dad's behavior, Ken created systems that helped his dad live a better life and helped keep Ken's mind at ease as well. Those systems, more importantly, were designed to be non-intrusive. So you begin to see where we're going with all this. As technology rapidly advances, we now have the opportunity to create environments that address everyone's wellness. It's a trend that our CEDIA members are extremely serious about. In fact, another one of our members who's done a ton of research into wearable health devices expressed it brilliantly. A guy named Mike Maniscalco, he's got a firm called Pythias. And he noted that technology is shifting from addressing a homeowner's wants to addressing a homeowner's needs. Kitchens are becoming the most connected rooms in the home. Bathrooms are about health and hygiene and relaxation and a spa-like experience. We're going to talk about whole home solutions and big overarching concepts for a little bit, but we will get into some specifics when it comes to these spaces. Let's talk about the evolution of this in the tech universe. Julie, if you're with us, can you expand on this, please? All right, we don't appear to have Julie with us right now. So I'm going to pick it up here, and we're going to talk about the quality of life, the well-being, all of these things that people experience and that help them in the wellness universe.
Yeah, and Ed, I can chime in with you on this, no problem.
If you would, Walt, go ahead if you'd like to add a little bit, please.
Absolutely. So before we dive into this slide, I think it'd be neat to note that Ed and I just came back from a show in Europe called Integrated Systems Europe, which is a show that is jointly about residential and commercial. And and Ed and I did several panels with people, and one of the panels was with a designer. And it was interesting to note that the designer said it was very important not to just care about aesthetics and how things look, but it was very important to design holistically so that someone could function nicely and with a wellness or biophilia type of component in their space. And that dovetails perfectly into this slide because we all fundamentally are connected to nature. And that's what wellness and biophilia is about. And that's what this slide is about. Sleep is very, very important. We have a lot of distractions to sleep. We're not getting enough sleep. Distractions may be the blue light coming from your phone, watching TV too late, social media, the wrong lighting, and we'll get into that later on in this presentation. Comfort has to not just do with temperature, but we'll get into a lot of things in as for comfort as well during this webinar. Stress reduction, I think it's fair to say we all have a ton of stress, and that's probably continuing to go. So a reduction of stress is really, really critical to well-being. Certain things can bring you joy, believe it or not, that we will go through in this, and it's not necessarily somebody cracking a joke, but it is maybe music or something else. Socialism and activity is something that usually takes a back seat because it requires discipline and responsibility. That's the one thing here that we won't be addressing directly as far as a treadmill goes, but it could be a wearable or some device that is monitoring you and saying, hey, get up from your desk. It's time to take a walk, go up the steps a couple times, which is exactly what I do because I work in a basement. So a lot of this stuff we're going to be talking about today directly relates to me because I employ a lot of these things, and they have definitely helped my well-being as I work in a very controlled, space. And then, of course, exposure to nature. We're going to hold on that thought because we're going to delve into that one a lot more, and that's one of Julie's passions, actually, that particular space.
While we're waiting for Julie to reconnect, I have heard her give this presentation in the past, and she likes to talk about a brief history of mankind. Now, back thousands, hundreds of thousands of years, even millions of years of evolution, when we were all little mammals at first and then began to become two-legged creatures, we spent all of our time outside, and all of that stimuli that surrounded us influenced how we would live. Light, motion, the way our ears are set up to hear certain sounds and detect certain things. We needed to be able to tell the difference between food and predators. We needed to be able to identify rustling in the grass. We needed to be alert to the different times of day. We needed to be folks that really understood the cycles of nature. We needed it to survive. And circadian lighting was really, really important. The biorhythms of lighting was really, really critical because you see, it wasn't until very recently that we humans started spending all of our time indoors. Like 90% of our time indoors. This is not really good for us. Now, I know we're doing something daunting here, which is summing up hundreds of thousands of years of human evolution and addressing what that means when it comes to what humans experience over the course of a 24-hour day. But as you can see by this graphic here, there are certain immutable laws. These are things that still happen to us no matter what, even though we're indoors. Now, one really intuitive place that we can start is with lighting. It's a change that we can implement pretty quickly. I'm going to let Walt speak about this a bit. What advancements have given us artificial lighting that better lines up with our human existence?
Yeah, I'd love to. And Ed, if you wouldn't mind, could you, if your keys are unglued, could you back up to the last slide?
You bet, dude.
I don't know how carefully people looked at this slide, but when we talk about light and we're connected to light, everybody's like, yeah, okay. But if you really look at this slide, a few of these things on here, it's actually pretty amazing, the research that's been done to show that what type of light and time of the day you have the best coordination. That happens at 14:30. For those of you that don't know military time, that's 2:30 in the afternoon. It affects our cardiovascular efficiency and our muscle strength at around 5 o'clock. It affects our blood pressure, our digestive system, our body temperatures, the release of chemicals like melatonin at 7:30, which on this chart. So it's really, this chart is just important to set up the next slide, which talks about how much we are actually tied to the temperature of light, and not only the temperature of light, but when that light happens. And thank you, Ed. So if we look at the very top left-hand picture, that is those are called color temperatures. Color temperatures are related or talked to in degrees Kelvin with a K. Now, when we first started lighting our homes with candles and with gas flames, we were around 1,000 degrees Kelvin all the way to the left.
Yep.
Then we moved into the electric light bulb that was around 2,000, 2,500 degrees Kelvin. You can still buy them today. I think they're called like antique bulbs or something. They generally have an amber coating on the outside that gives you a really warm light, and it also has a filament which burns. And it's important to note that the color temperature is derived from the heat of the filament. So if a light bulb is a warm, glowing light that's 2,000 degrees Kelvin, that means that filament inside the bulb is actually 2,000 degrees Kelvin. A halogen light would be 4,000 degrees Kelvin, somewhere around there. It's burning hotter. It gives off a whiter light. So just think of a match. The blue flame at the very end of the match versus the amber flame at the end of the match. That tells you the difference in color and light that's coming off based on the temperature. Then we came into like warm lighting and cool lighting, the terrible fluorescent lights. And then these daylight LED lights, which basically knock the daylights out of me because they're pretty harsh. But what this chart is telling us is this is a range of color that we can reproduce artificially with RGB, which is red, green, blue LEDs in a modern LED light bulb today. And we need to cycle through these ranges throughout the day at the right times.
And we also have some concerns and some useful things that we can do when it comes to lighting. One of the concerns, Walt, is of course blue light and how bad that is for human beings, especially at certain times of day. Can you expand on that a little bit? I know you guys have done a lot of work with this.
Yeah, so there is LEDs can give off blue light. And that could be your TV, it could be your phone screen, it could be a light bulb. And there was a recent study that was released in France that I believe, don't quote me on this, but I believe it was done by the government or sponsored by the government, which says that they believe that blue light is damaging to the retinas. You can get blue filters for your glasses. I know they have at least 2 different kinds, of which I have on my glasses to try to filter some of that out. But current thought process is we should try to limit our exposure to blue light, but there's no hard and fast guidelines right now for that. But you can adjust blue light levels with adjusting color temperatures on bulbs.
And all of this affects not just how you visualize things and how you see, and there's even solutions with certain kinds of lighting, color, temperature, and strength, and so on, that can help folks who are experiencing visual impairments or the like, but it also affects the skin as well. It can really have a kind of holistic impact on your person as you move through the day. Light
as well as
is
plants.
Yeah, exactly. We're going to talk about something called daylighting, because what this means, when we bring daylight into spaces, it's really beneficial. That's why shading solutions are really important. Exposing folks to daylight, literally, daylighting has some pretty profound impacts. We know that folks who sit closer to a window in an open office space, or don't have an office that's shut off from the world and windowless and this kind of thing, those folks see decreased absenteeism. There's decreased employee turnover in those businesses that allow a lot of natural light and visual stimulation from the outside to come in. In schools, it's improved student test scores. Patients that are in hospitals experience faster surgical recovery, and they often need fewer pain medications as a result of this exposure to nature. All of this is called, it feeds into the concept of biophilia. Now, there's a larger thing called wellness, but we've been drilling down to this term that, frankly, a lot of people don't like because it sounds a little strange. It's biophilia, and it's a compound word, two words, bio, of course, meaning life, and philia, or life and nature, and philia meaning love. So biophilia specifically means a love of nature or a love of living things. It is a DNA-based connection to nature that is regulated by the circadian cycle that we've already spoken about a bit. Now, we're going to start with some visual stimulation beyond just light, and we're going to talk about some of the ways that we can bring nature into spaces. I mentioned those faster surgical recoveries. There was an Ulrich study in 1984 where two different patients had different views out their window. One was a parking lot or a brick wall or something of that nature. The other was literally nature, trees and the like. And the folks who were exposed to the natural view out the window had a quicker recovery time, needed less pain medications, as I just mentioned. And as, again, we've mentioned, there's been numerous workplace studies that find that the folks who are closest to the windows, to the outdoors, they don't call in sick nearly as much, and they don't turn over as much either. Now, there's ways not just to bring the view to the employee, but to bring nature indoors to the folks who are using these spaces. There are plants. That's very simple. There's green space that you can put in public spaces, windows, obviously, water features, natural products like wood, or you can create things called living walls. These things are brilliant. They started popping up about 5 or 6 years ago, I'd guess. The photograph on the bottom right is a great example of a massive living wall that's in Sonos headquarters. Sonos, the active speaker manufacturer. And living walls, when they're done properly, they have a number of effects on the space around them. What they do, first of all, is provide a natural air cleaner. They're constantly refreshing the air in those public spaces. And additionally, they provide that lovely green, lush look that humans are attracted to. Now, all of this, when you take all of this research that's been done, you come up with something called evidence-based design. And that's taking the human experience and what's best for humans and applying it into these kinds of applications here, these kind of building designs here. They're really, really lovely. And that stat that Julie's provided us, 10% of employee absences can be attributed to architecture with no connection to nature. So the old brutalist kind of style of architecture seems to be going by the wayside when it comes
Hey, Ed.
Yeah.
I'm going to throw another thing in here that a lot of people
Please.
probably don't think of, that we will be delving into a little towards the end, which is sound. That wall of living plants is also an absorber. And if you look at that space, there's all hard surfaces. There's concrete, there's a steel ceiling. there is an absorber. So it and sound profoundly affects us, which we will get into in a little bit.
You got it. Thanks, Walt. Appreciate it. All right, we've got some terms here that we want to expand upon that are directly related to biophilia. Biomimetics or biomimicry. That's all about simulating nature or mimicking things found in nature. And biodigitry, not quite a word yet, but that's the idea of simulating nature through technology. And there are various ways to do that. We can create now with the right technology virtual nature views. And I'm not just talking about one of the most popular features on CBS's Sunday Morning, The Moment of Nature at the end. I'm talking about actually creating these devices that can give you the sense of space and nature around you in a very virtual manner. Walt, you've seen some of these, right?
Yes, I've seen plenty of those, and it's important to note. So, just as a side note, I've often wondered when I sit in a dentist chair and I stare at, tiles on the ceiling, why they don't have something like this. That it's an uncomfortable place to be, and being able to see outside with a camera and see what's going on would be absolutely fantastic when you're trying not to stare at the dental hygienist and not make eye contact. So, this is also can get quite technical and be quite convincing. So I'll just take the example of the top right hand image of if you see the vertical display on the right hand wall that's mimicking a window.
Yep.
That does not need to be a static display, because if it's static, it would start to become unconvincing. And this is the biggest challenge of integrating technology and fooling the mind, which would be to make it appear as though it's realistic. So there are many products around that have sensors that will sense your position to that picture. So as you move to the left or move to the right, its perspective changes. And as you get closer or further away, its perspective can change, which gives it another level of looking realistic.
And what kind of resolution and dynamic range of color, Walt, do we need in these displays in order to make them convincing, so that folks don't feel like they're just looking at another TV screen?
Well, that's a loaded question there, Ed. Today's technology can suffice 4K and high dynamic range. And for those that are curious, when 4K came out, high dynamic range came with it. High dynamic range, 4K was kind of a Trojan horse. High dynamic range is way more important to our eyes than is the 4K resolution, and a lot of that has to do with the Lechner distance and how far away you are standing from a panel. The reason why I bring this up is if you have your face 8 inches from the panel, then resolution matters. Or if the panel is the entire size of the wall, like in the picture down the bottom where there's a ceiling, that's a pretty large panel. So you don't want to be able to pick out pixels. You just want to see a seamless image. So I guess the answer to your question is it would be designed. You would figure out what the application is, and then you would do the proper design to make sure the display meets the requirements.
Now, we're looking at commercial applications for the most part here as we sit here, with the possible exception of this one image down in the middle center there. But if you think about it, can you imagine cooking a meal under the starlight, even if it was a virtual thing? If you're in a multi-dwelling unit, a lot of apartments, if you're in a kitchen that doesn't have the availability of skylights there or whatever, to have this virtual kind of universe around you would be really, really incredible. And if you take it to a bathroom, a closed off, perhaps, space in your home, and you start adding in these displays with this wonderful random perspective driven kind of imagery, then man, it's really going to become an even more spa-like experience for the user, right, Walt?
Yeah, I would say that these displays are the new mirror. I know in design we used to take mirrors to fool us in thinking a space was larger, or it just felt more comfortable, felt more open. I'll say again, nothing replaces the real thing. So if you can get a window in there, that's it. But if you can't get a window or some other surface, those of us who know Star Trek and the holodeck, we are 100% moving in that direction. At within 10 years time, we will have all surfaces emissive,
Yeah.
of which you can do whatever you like. So it opens up a huge thing for wellness, for biophiliac design, and for even creative and artistic design, which you can do with this stuff as well.
So interestingly, too, Walt, and we need to mention that the display should mimic the actual time of day for the most part. There obviously be a couple of use cases where you wouldn't want that to happen. Let's suppose you're recovering from jet lag and you're trying to tune these displays so they will slowly take you back into the right time zone, perhaps. But for
Yes.
the most part, you want these things mimicking the right time of day.
Yes, and
Yeah.
I'll tell you that this is being accepted, and this is the perfect image for this. And I just experienced it on my 2 flights over to Europe.
Love it.
We were on, I'll tell you the plane, if anybody gets on one, we were on an Airbus A350-900, and
Yep.
they had color changing lighting temperature going on. So
Yep.
before they, would have the lights go down for people to get ready for sleep, it went through a quite slow light temperature change through the different spectrums. And I'll tell you, it worked. It was very calming. And then when they would wake you up for a service, they didn't just jam the lights on like they used to do in the old days. It was a very slow rise and a color temperature change also in the bathroom. So it just helped to eliminate some of that discomfort when you travel, and it was surprisingly effective.
There's also a move afoot to perhaps even eliminate windows in some of these airplanes and replace it with the technology that we've been speaking about, which is these virtual kind of displays that appear to be a view out of an airplane window, but in reality are just another technologically brilliant display. Royal Caribbean does this with some of their interior rooms so that everybody has the experience. They've got these high-res cameras pointed at the ocean, and even though you're in your cabin, in the interior of this particular ship, you've got that feeling that you're seeing the open ocean. Without the breezes, well, maybe not. The technology is moving in that direction, I think. There are layers of nature that we need to speak about when it comes to all of this biophilic design. There's visual, we've talked about that quite a bit. There's auditory, we'll get into that a little bit more in just a couple of moments. There's thermal. It is so important for humans to be at the right temperature, to be at a comfortable temperature. You know you're uncomfortable when you're too hot or too cold, and we need to take all of that seriously, especially in the different zones of a home. Smells are important. Aromatherapy is another aspect of this that can be integrated into some of these technological solutions. We need space. We need to have the feeling that we have space around us because we evolved out of doors and wanted to stay out of those caves back hundreds of thousands of years ago. We needed that overhead sky always around us. And there's something called stochastic stimuli. And what that is that's the little leaf that rustles, the random blade of grass, the sudden burst of noise from a babbling brook. It's that random stimuli that, as it turns out, is very, very important to the human experience. There are a number of people who determined that what they needed to do was to work well would be to sit in a room, perhaps a writer say, that had no stimuli whatsoever. And it turns out that's not so good for you. You constantly, as a human, need to have that random pattern of movement or sound around you. It is really, really important to your well-being. And that's what stochastic stimuli is. Now, when we talk about these particular virtual scenes that can surround us, and I don't know if any of you folks have seen the movie Total Recall. It's what Walt's been talking about here a little bit, is these emissive surfaces all around you that can contain images that are either generated by the panel or projected onto the panel. But you also need audio experiences with these, because Walt, it becomes very uncomfortable, as it turns out, even though it might be an unconscious discomfort. when you're looking at some of these scenes and there's no attendant sound, right?
Oh yeah. Simple thing that everybody can do in the call. Put a movie or TV show on and turn the audio off and watch it. And then turn the audio back on, of course, you'll have a better experience. But on the flip side, turn the image off and just
Right.
listen. Our hearing is probably our strongest sense, and is the trickiest one of these to fool out of all the other senses that we have.
It is critically important that you have audio around. And even music can improve the wellness experience. We've got a couple of things here to talk about. Stroke survivors listening to their favorite music regained their verbal skills much faster. People who are recovering from open heart surgery reduced cortisol levels with classical music. Music before operations are as effective as anti-anxiety medications. Nature sounds versus urban office noise, 37% faster restoration from those stressors. Background music reduces cognitive fatigue and helps with motivation. And it's critically important that you have visual and auditory stimuli together. It's really important. You need those river sounds when you're looking at that virtual stream, no matter where it is, home or office. Oh, by the way,
God.
that's all right. The song that reduced overall anxiety by 65% and was determined to be the most calming song, according to a study by Mind Lab International, was a tune called Weightless by Marconi. Walt, go ahead.
Just to take it one more level on this slide, I saw a presentation from a doctor from Mount Cedar-Sinai Hospital, and they had been using virtual reality, which you've touched on kind of at the end here, but with people to experiment with pain management, and in many cases where opioids were non-effective, putting someone in an immersive experience of visual and audio made their pain go away. So it unlocks the power of the mind, just to let you know how powerful this stuff is. And they're doing real studies in that right now.
Beyond music, what do you think was probably the most beneficial sound to have? A babbling brook. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. There are a lot of implications here for open plan offices and places with hard surfaces where you get a lot of conversation around. I know that you've done a lot of research into the folks at Plantronics, right, Walt? And what
yes,
they've
created a company called Habitat.
Mm-hmm.
They believe that this is a legitimate category, that they've created an independent brand that is all about taming and making better the office environment as far as masking sound and helping to control noise, as well as making soothing sounds like the brooks that you talked about.
Yep. And if you look at this particular image in the lower left-hand corner, we've got a water feature here that can exist in an office space or even a residential space. If you'd have the money for that particular one, that looks like a little pricey. That one looks like it'd be a bit pricey, but there are lower cost options here, certainly. While we're on the subject of sound, Walt, we've spent a lot of time talking about adding things to the environment so far, but what if we approach sound the way we also like to approach air or water quality, getting rid of the pollution? Walt, tell us why noise reduction is so important, especially in spaces like kitchens or baths that are full of hard surfaces. How do we clean up that audio environment?
Yeah, I think audio gets the short end of the stick every time. I think people just don't think about it. They just accept it. The world is getting louder, and everywhere we go is loud. And in many cases, we need to be controlling how loud a space is. A lot of modern design today tends to be towards hard surfaces, which makes things even louder.
Yeah.
So there needs to be a balance between how a space looks and how acoustics performs in a space. So much so that there are even apps now, and everyone's always interested in this app, so I'm going to go ahead and give it a plug. The app is called Sound Print, Print. I discovered this app because one of the issues I had was when I wanted to go out to dinner and have a conversation with friends and family, the last thing I wanted was to go into a restaurant that was really loud because it had no consideration for any absorption, and we would end up yelling all night, and we would leave hoarse and irritated. So
Hmm.
this app, you can put your zip code in, and it will tell you which restaurants around you have acceptable decibel levels, which ones are loud. You can catalog your own, which I do everywhere I go. But the point of this is people realize that sound is fatiguing, loud is fatiguing. Where does everybody end up when you have a party? In the kitchen. And when you have 20, 30 people, 40 people in your kitchen and the drinks are flowing, everybody's having a good time and music is on, it becomes a shouting match. Everybody is yelling. So the one of the challenges to kitchen and bathroom is exactly the same. Bathroom is probably the place where you're going to get the worst because it's generally a smaller space and pretty much all those surfaces are 100% hard. So it is a challenge to incorporate diffusion or absorption to try to
Yep.
break up those sound waves so you actually feel better in that space and can hold a conversation. You'll stay longer and you'll feel much better.
It's easy to do in a space like a living room or a dining room because in a living room you can obviously introduce things like rugs and upholstered furniture and heavy draperies and things of that nature. It's sometimes more difficult in a kitchen space because the nature of the room. You've got a lot of hard surfaces there, and obviously you don't want a lot of upholstered furniture in the kitchen necessarily. It's going to make for difficult cleaning.
Yeah,
Okay,
you want to
so
back up a quick second there, Ed,
sure.
just to point out those two slides you had. The one ceiling that is in the top left-hand picture, those are panels that create a design element but also absorb sound. And
Yep,
then the picture to the lower right, that ceiling feature it has become an architectural feature, but that's diffusion. Those are little
yep.
blocks that are each of different height and different depth. And when sound hits it, it just breaks it up and makes it scatter. Same thing with the walls, and that makes that place it gives it a nice design element, but it also
Yep.
makes it acoustically really comfortable.
Yeah, so this is really interesting. This is something that CEDIA integrators do really, really well when we talk about tuning and calibrating a room. Knowing the difference between absorption, which literally absorbs sound, and diffusion, which, as Walt said, scatters sound all around, and knowing how to do that given the frequencies that that room is going to experience. Is that room used for listening? Is it used for conversation? Is it used for experiencing music or movies? Knowing what that specific room is for goes a long way toward helping you find the solutions for it, right, Walt?
Absolutely.
All right, let's talk about all of the natural stuff that we can bring back into the home if we're careful and mindful. Circadian temperature, pretty important. Warmer in the daytime, cooler at night, kind of intuitive, right? There's ways to do that that can be programmed with machine learning properly. Indoor air quality is becoming really, really important. Ventilation, air purification, purified water. A lot of people are really thinking about purified water and the best way, not just to reduce, say, the hardness of the water, but to really, really introduce the right stuff into drinking and bathing water. Aromatherapy, we've mentioned, this is becoming a big category, a big segment here. Acoustical comfort was something that Walt just talked about here moments ago. Places of refuge, a place to get away from it, to sit down, to look out the window, to read a book, to have some quiet time. Personal control of all of these things so that the individual user can kind of pick their scene in the home. And as we mentioned, the stochastic process, randomness and motion. I just did a panel with an interior designer named Cinzenza Moretti. Moretti Design, if you're interested, is her firm. She's out of Italy. Her husband is a lighting integrator. He specializes in custom lighting designs for high-end clients. And she is an interior designer that Walt and I interviewed on the main stage at ISE, Integrated Systems Europe, last week in Amsterdam. And Cinzenzia really focused on all of this stuff. She brought all of these elements into her interior design projects, and we saw some of them, and they were absolutely spectacular. Walt, what did you think of her holistic approach to this? She was designing not just for the eyes, but for all of the senses, I thought.
Yeah, it was really refreshing. So I have done lots of integration and dealt with lots of designers, and it was nice to see one that had a holistic view on how a human would interact in a space. So
Right.
design was very important, lighting was very important, feeling comfortable was very important, and of course, the customer always has their demands. So in many cases, they couldn't pull it off in some areas because they said, nope, we want it to be exactly this particular way. But when she can influence, she would absolutely influence to try to make sure the space was more usable and you felt better in the space.
There's another obvious solution here is to take the indoors outside as opposed to bringing the outdoors inside. We have seen decks, patios, and other spaces like those become literally rooms in and of themselves. And we've got entertainment options. We've got televisions that are literally weatherproof. We've got speakers that can be hidden, that can become part of the landscape, subwoofers that are partially buried outside to help you with a movie watching experience. There's all kinds of kitchen technology that can be taken outside and people do it. There are ways to create spaces that open to the outside, especially in the right climate. There are a lot of options here for you to take the kitchen experience, and in some places, if you've got the right client in the right space, even the bath experience outside. It's really become wide open with the technology that we've got right now. Let's talk about kitchens and baths specifically. The bath here that we're looking at is from CEDIA member Big Picture Solutions. The kitchen shot is from a firm called Look and Listen. And you can see in the left there, to the left there, how that biophilic design has really become a part of that particular bathroom. So the bathroom becomes a sanctuary, a real place for relaxation, a spa in the home. Chromotherapy is picking the right colors for a specific bathroom, for a specific time of day. Aromatherapy, music, sound, maybe some steam, the introduction of steam into the bathroom as well. Humidity control is important, indoor air quality, IAQ. Can you introduce some kind of natural connection into the bathroom with fire or even a water or plant feature, as we've noted here? Make sure it's safe, make sure it's comfortable, and make sure that it's sanitary. And lighting in these spaces is a big part of it. We're going to get into some specifics in just a second, but we're going to talk about first some of the lighting solutions as they apply to different rooms in the home. Circadian lighting. If you have the right lighting in the bathroom and you're getting ready for work or getting ready for bed, if you've got the right color temperature, it's going to make all the difference in the world. That color rendering in there could be critically important. What's the first thing we do in the morning? We generally look in the mirror. If we feel good about ourselves and like the way we look, we kind of have a better day, don't we? So we have the proper lighting in the bathroom at 6 or 7 a.m., we're going to be in better shape from a psychological perspective. We want the lighting to be subtle. We want it to be uniform. We want it to enhance the fixtures and appliances that we've got in those spaces. And of course, we want safety and comfort. Perhaps an automated lighting system that gently comes up and doesn't blast you with all kinds of blue light when you step in there to do your business at 2 o'clock in the morning. Same is true for the kitchen. You want circadian lighting to help you through the path of your day and also to help make the food look as good as possible.
And that's a really key thing that you hit on as far as color rendering index, which talks about how accurate a light is. So we're used to seeing reflective light. So all the colors that we see is the light reflected off of a surface. So the more accurate the source that is doing the reflection off of the light, the better that you can see. So there's a real consideration, especially in a kitchen, of being able to change color temperature. So when you're cooking, you can see the difference between the steak and exactly the color temperature that it was cooked, because if the color rendering index is off or the lights are permanently set to like an incandescent bulb, you will never see the food the way you're supposed to see the food as you're preparing it.
All right, let's talk about UV light for just a second. How about UV lights used to come with warnings in the past. They could cause vision problems. But as Ken Erdman, who we mentioned earlier, wrote for Cedia in our blog at cedia.net, I want to quote him because this is great stuff. Today, research is being done using LED lamps and luminaires to target specific bacteria, molds, and allergens. The University of Strathclyde in Glasgow, Scotland, discovered that a specific blue light wavelength of proper intensity could deactivate methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus, MRSA is how it's commonly known, and other strains of bacteria, including Listeria and E. coli. There are companies that are providing lamps for residential applications that require mold remediation and antibacterial uses. You could, for example, use a lamp that combines white lights that switches to UV when the occupant exits to kill mold in a shower. If customers are aging or if they have compromised immune systems due to illness or injury or chronic health problems, the installation of the proper combination of blue and white light sources could have a dramatic impact on the quality of life. This is a brilliant, brilliant application of this technology that Ken has started to see pop up, Walt.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it started off probably HVAC did it 15, 20 years ago. You could get a blue bulb in your return to kill things. And then water's been doing it to treat the main water. This makes total sense.
Yep. All right. Now, Julie found something really, really interesting at CES. And this is an application that absolutely blew my mind. This is light tech in a fridge from a company, I believe I'm pronouncing it correctly, called Bico. And the company behind this particular high-end fridge, and you can see like what's going on with the vegetable trays there in the lower right. It's called Active Fresh Blue Light. Now, this is not an ad for them. I just thought it was fascinating. Fruits and vegetables can stay fresh up to 30% longer, according to these folks, and retain vitamins and nutrients with this new technology that stimulates natural lighting conditions, extending the photosynthesis process into your refrigerator. So the stuff is still vibrant and fresh and alive when you take it out of the fridge. I think it's fascinating that this stuff is being applied to appliances, literally, in this fashion. Walt was at CES last month. Walt, I know you saw some tech there that would relate to what we've talked about and would relate to these spaces in the kitchen and bath. If you can recall any of the stuff that you ran into on the floor there, we'd love to hear about it.
Gotcha. I mean, it was kind of, it's probably too vast to get into. I can tell you that it's probably the hottest growing area at CES. So drones, big deal. People knew about drones. We used to be a giant growing area, not so much now. Wellness is expanding like crazy, and that also includes biophilia design and products for that. People are willing to pay for feeling and looking better. It's always been that case. Lots of times they've done it medically, they've done it surgically, but if they can do it where they feel better and they live better in their homes with devices like this and proper design, they're going to pay for it because it pays off.
There are also a lot of devices and technological advancements that are helping the differently abled out there too that I think we need to mention. Walt, I know, and this could help anybody, literally. Walt experimented with an exoskeleton at CES. I saw a video of this that was fascinating. It allowed you to pick up a weight with your right arm that was vastly heavier than anything you could have been able to pick up on your own, right?
Yeah, that's going to be implemented. It was a particular thing at a believe it or not, Delta was at CES and had a booth there, and the Delta CEO gave a keynote. And you're thinking, well, why would an airline company be at the world's largest electronics trade show? It's because basically wellness and biophilia and reducing stress when you travel. They get that people need this stuff. Lots of airlines can get you from point A to point B, but what could separate is your experience. So I talked already about the color changing temperature.
Yeah.
They're going to be deploying exoskeletons so people can work more efficiently and have less injury. It is exploding in all areas. A lot of times it'll start out in the commercial, but it will end up in the residential.
We've seen a lot of advancements in augmented reality glasses as well, and some of those other technologies that are really fascinating. And I think the most exciting application of these is literally helping folks who might be suffering from some memory issues. If you had a pair of glasses that could get you home with a heads-up display, or a pair of glasses that could help you recognize loved ones with a heads-up display and facial recognition, think about all of the possibilities that lie therein. And, I'd like to really end with this before we open the floor for questions, if we have any. This is why we feel that CEDIA industry professionals are best equipped to handle these technology integrations, because they handle all of these systems integrations: lighting, visuals, audio, HVAC, telehealth, security, monitoring, motorized shades, outdoor entertainment. And coordinating with the other trades is always important. You want to get this started at the beginning of the conversation. You can really sell wellness as a feature of a kitchen, bath, or a whole home project, for example. And all of our CEDIA members are really excellent at providing long-term service and support for all of these technological advancements, because we all know that everything updates and gets firmware, software updates, and things get glitchy. But a CEDIA professional, having them along to help you out through this journey, can ease that friction considerably and reduce those pain points altogether. So did anybody have any questions? Deb, did you field any questions during the presentation that we should cover?
I have. Thank you, guys. This has been great. This has been great. I'm sorry that we lost Julie.
It's okay.
She wasn't able to rejoin us. So here's some questions for you. So someone said, it sounds like we're actually putting bugs in a house and they're not sure how they feel about this. So if you're working with a client, how do you kind of overcome that thought process with a client?
What a fantastic
great question. So that's
fantastic.
Want me to take that, Ed?
Please go for it, Walter.
Something we didn't talk about, which was security and privacy. And that definitely plays a part in all this stuff. There are sensors that do kind of anonymous data, and where this stuff is going. For instance, let's talk about, which is a subject we didn't particularly cover today, but it ties into all this, living in place. So the term aging in place is not a good term. It's considered offensive. So if you all wanted to know, the official term is living in place. And we wanted to monitor that someone was moving around and doing their normal day to day and nothing was wrong. There are products now that do what's called gait analysis, and your gait is how you walk, and everyone's gait is specifically unique to you.
Like a fingerprint.
It's your fingerprint, your body print, I guess. And it doesn't use cameras in the traditional sense. It just draws you as a stick figure to see how you look when you walk and you sit, and if you're getting up and if you're not getting up. So that is I would say not intrusive. There are audio analytics, which you have a concern about, which can sense audio issues. There are video analytics, so much so that they can read lips. If someone has a speech problem, they can be a bit, and they can take a look at facial expressions and decide someone's in distress, someone's comfortable, someone's not comfortable. They have their purpose, and you'd use those with the right type of customer that might need those. But there are other things happening too. Netgear just released something that we've been talking about for a while, which basically our homes are blanketed by RF frequencies like Wi-Fi. They can see the disruptions in the frequencies as you walk around to monitor movement for security, for living in place. Again, that's going to be very nondescript data, not showing exactly what you're doing. So I guess to sum up the answer to your question, these are discussions that need to be had with the customer when you're designing a system to see their level of comfort, and then the right devices will be designed to the system that meet the needs and meet their level of comfort.
And we're moving toward a situation where we don't have to send all this data to the cloud. There's something called edge computing that's happening. There's been great advancements in this particular technology, and edge computing is about machine learning, close to you, where information is not shared with an Amazon or a Facebook or a Google or anywhere else, where the information is kept in-house. And we're learning how to secure this information with technologies like blockchain. All of these technologies are coming together to create, we hope, a more secure environment for the user. Next question, Deb.
Yes. Okay. Great. Let's see. So, someone's thanking both of you for an exceptional presentation. They said they're launching Canada's first trade conference for living in place,
Ooh,
and wellness is a big part of their attendees. And what
excellent.
is there an association or certificate program that you know of for wellness?
Ooh, great question.
There is one standard I'm aware of right now, which is done by a company called Delos, DELOS. They have the Well Living Standard.
Yeah.
Right now, it is targeted towards commercial spaces
And hospitality too, right? Well,
and hospitality. That's
Yeah.
correct. But this is going to be an exploding category because this is the one thing that affects every living thing. So it's not going to be optional. We're all wired for this. So this is something to definitely pay attention to.
cool. Anything
Okay.
else, Deb?
Oh yeah, lots.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's one. These new technologies are expensive right now and seem to be for the one percenters. What can we do on a tight budget?
So there are a lot of technologies that are not expensive. It usually starts out very esoteric and very system wide and
Mhm.
expensive, but it quickly moves down market. And it's just an interesting note. When Ed talked about a CEDIA integrator, they traditionally installed custom equipment where that was expensive, that needed a lot of programming and things like that. Now, a lot of they still do some of that, but they also integrate do-it-yourself products, DIY products, Nest and Ring and all these other products because they're good solutions. They're inexpensive. They meet people's budgets. So the bottom line, I mean, just to talk about, we're not specifically plugging products here, but the Philips Hue light bulbs are not expensive and they color change and they're easily even retrofittable. So what would need to happen is with any project, you need to carve out what budget you are able to put towards this segment of the job, and then parts can be found that are appropriate that can meet those needs for that job.
Okay,
Next.
good answer. Thank you. Yep. So people are asking, are there any brands that you could recommend for the V acoustic products?
Ooh, any brands for sound isolation or sound absorption diffusion, Walt?
Okay, so there's lots of brands, but this is one of those areas that I'll really caution. And I know we have a lot of professionals on the phone who did a lot of study and design what they provide. So acoustics isn't simply I get a product, I get some double stick tape, put it on the wall, and I've solved my problem.
Well done, Walt.
Acoustics can actually be incredibly complex, one of the most
Yeah.
complex things because of how sound waves interact with dimensions of a room, as well as surfaces of the room. So I could name some products, but they all need to be designed. You need to. So I would say if you want to research this further, you need to get in touch with somebody that can do acoustics, and they will design. Or in many cases, you may over design or ruin a space and go the absolute opposite direction of what you're trying to fix. So it definitely is a curated thing that you need to have help with a professional.
Okay, good answer. So there's someone that asked, have you collaborated with the Heart Math Institute on the heart variability and coherence between the heart and the brain?
Hmm.
No, but I'd love to. I'm just writing that down right now.
Okay, awesome.
Okay, Walt's noted that for future study. That's standard.
That's great. So I think there's still some confusion out there about incorporating fusion and sound into residential kitchens and baths. I think you touched on sort of more maybe corporate and or so we're looking at residential ways of incorporating that.
Yeah, so I can handle that
Yeah,
quickly.
thanks.
So basically, a room that has all hard surfaces, which is interesting to note. I just was having a conversation with Ed the other day. As styles of architecture has changed, it's gotten louder. So when you look at Victorian style, lots of couches, lots of rugs, lots of drapes. And when you look at modern style, lots of concrete, lots of glass, lots of steel.
Mhm.
So these spaces have become, even though they're cleaner looking, they become really loud. So what you need to do is incorporate sound absorption or diffusion products as an architectural element to absorb and diffuse the loud sound. So things on the ceiling, things above cabinets that you can't see because the sound will hit the ceiling, reflect off of the ceiling, and then where the cabinet is, that could be all lined on the top with absorbative material that will, once the sound hits it, it'll absorb it and it will kill it. Rugs, if you can, drapes, if you can. I understand lots of times you can't do those. But shelving, books, believe it or not, is also a great way to absorb and diffuse sound. Just a bunch of old books. It looks cool, kind of gives you a tie to the past, but it's also functional from a sound perspective.
Great,
Terrific.
thank you, thank you. So there are a
Hey,
couple questions out here. I just want to give you two more, if it's okay.
oh, that's fine. Sure, go for it.
Okay, so someone's asking about how about using like indoor gardening or grow cabinets or
Oh,
incorporating those things into that for that impact on nature in the home.
fabulous idea. I'm fully in favor of it. I love the idea of living walls. I love the idea of any technologies that give you indoor grow spaces. You can go big, you can go pricey, you can go small, you can go simple. There are so many solutions out there to introduce green living things into your home that you can actually eat. I
Okay.
think it's a spectacular idea.
Agreeing with you, Ed. That is also a great way to help bring biophilia design into a kitchen, as
Yep.
well as produce food. And that was a huge growing area at CES. A lot of companies are offering from big to small devices that do this. And if it's big enough, there's a help with your sound problem.
Yep.
Okay, so how about this one? What knowledge do you have on neuroaesthetics? I heard that Google did an experiment in 2019 at the Salon show in Italy. Have you heard about what they've done?
I
I'm
have
not,
not. Well,
but yeah, I'm not particularly familiar with that exact research. I have been following the category as a whole, including brain to computer interface, which is BCI, which Elon Musk is one of those guys getting into that game. All I can tell you is it's more and more about neuro and about brain monitoring and what is effective and what isn't effective. So I'll have to come up to speed on that particular project, but it's a
Yeah,
really it's a thing.
yeah. So maybe there's something out there on that Heart Math Institute that someone was talking about.
yeah, I think these are two things that could lead to another webinar next year.
Exactly. Exactly. And that leads me to this question. Someone asked, when is CEDIA coming back to San Diego?
Oh, I gotta let you take that one.
Man, I don't remember. I know let's see, we've got Denver this year, then Indy, and I don't think they mapped it out yet as far as what's down the pike here. We're going back to Dallas, I want to say, perhaps. I'm getting a nod from my colleague on that one that it's going to be like Denver, Indy, Dallas. I'm sure we'll go back. It's going to be a couple of years, though.
Okay. And then there was just a quick comment here. Thank you, guys. A quick comment here about Natufia, which is a fridge type of product that has lighting for growing products indoors.
Oh,
So,
cool.
yeah, so I thought that was kind of nice. Thank you for providing that, Linda. And if there aren't any more questions, I know we're over time here. I want to thank you both so very much, Ed and Walt, and everyone out there in the audience. It's been,
You bet. Can I mention a couple of things very, very quickly?
of course.
CEDIAawards.org is our awards site. This site showcases our award winners from around the world. The descriptions are written in language that is really easy to understand. This site is not very techy. It will give you a lot of ideas if you're interested in what home technology can do. And if you're interested in really diving into this stuff, Julie, who unfortunately we lost earlier in the webinar for technical reasons, apparently, CE Pro is her publication. And right there, you see a deep dive into the top tech trends of 2020. She predicts it's going to be wellness and biophilia. And that's going to do it for this one, Deb.
Okay, gentlemen, thank you. And thank you, everyone in the audience, for being with us today. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.